The twin suns of Threx 9 blazed high in the alien sky, casting a strange orange and silver light over the sprawling city of Velkar. The air hung thick with dust and the cacophony of 100 alien tongues. Through the chaotic river of the open market, Captain Rowan Hale moved with the weary gait of a man who had seen too much of the galaxy's dark corners. His ship, the Wayfarer, was in desperate need of a power coil, and this wretched marketplace was his last hope for a cheap part. But the air here was heavier than just dust. It was thick with despair. Merchants shouted their wares, machines hummed a discordant tune, and the rattling of metal cages formed a sickening rhythm. This was a place where anything and everything had a price tag, even life. Rowan's jaw tightened as a metallic voice boomed from a platform. Strong laborers, silent workers, fresh stock from the outer colonies. Stock. That word twisted in his gut like a knife. He had seen the horrors of war, the brutality of slavery, but this casual commercial cruelty felt like a deeper poison. Cages lined the dusty pathways, filled with creatures from a dozen worlds. Some whimpered, some snarled, but many just stared with empty eyes, their spirits already broken. The crowd laughed and haggled, their voices a harsh counterpoint to the silent suffering. Rowan had seen enough. He turned to leave, his mission forgotten, when a tiny, trembling voice cut through the din. "Can you buy me, and take me as your slave?" Rowan froze. He must have imagined it. But there it was again, a whisper carried on the dry wind, so fragile it nearly broke. He scanned the shadows and saw her. Huddled beside a large cage was a little girl, no older than 8. Her skin was a pale, delicate blue, her hair as white as starlight. But it was her eyes that seized him, wide, luminous, and filled with a terror so profound it made his breath catch. A heavy metal collar was locked around her neck, a short chain tethering her to the ground like an animal. The merchant, a creature with a mouthful of sharp teeth, noticed his gaze and laughed. "Ah, human. Interested in the little pet? She's weak, but she can clean floors and fetch water. Cheap price." Rowan felt something shatter inside him. In that small, terrified face, he saw a ghost. The ghost of his own daughter, lost to him years ago. He took, in the quiet docks of Velkar's outer ring, the silver hull of the Wayfarer shimmered under the pale moons. Inside, the air was still, a calm that felt wrong to Captain Rowan Hale. He sat at the control chair, his gaze fixed on the sleeping child wrapped in his old jacket. The girl, now named Lyra, was curled up near the ship's console, her breathing soft and shallow, as if the silence itself might wake the monsters of her past. Rowan leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. He'd bought many things in his life: supplies, ship parts, fuel, but never a soul. What he'd done today wasn't a business deal. It was something else, something deeper and far more dangerous. The ship's AI, Eve, shattered the silence. "Captain Rowan, I must repeat, harboring a non-human life form without proper documentation violates 3 separate galactic trade codes." Rowan let out a long sigh. "I know, Eve. I know. Would you like me to file her as cargo?" He frowned, his voice sharp. "She's not cargo." "Then what is she, Captain?" Rowan's eyes drifted back to the sleeping girl. "A child." The AI paused for several seconds, processing. "Your tone suggests emotional involvement. This will affect decision-making efficiency." "Then let it," he muttered. He stood, walked over, and quietly draped a small blanket over Lyra. Her skin, a soft blue like moonlight on water, shimmered faintly under the cabin lights. She stirred, whispering in her sleep. Don't take me back." Rowan froze, his fists clenching at his sides. Whoever had chained her must have done things he didn't even want to imagine. He walked to the viewport and stared out at the sprawling alien city, its lights flickering like dying embers. He remembered his own daughter, her small hands, her soft laughter, lost years ago in a mining accident on Mars. That wound had never healed, and now this child, this alien girl, had torn it wide open. The next morning, Lyra woke to the unfamiliar smell of food. Rowan sat by the small cooking unit, frying ration bread in a pan. The sound of sizzling filled the cabin. She sat up slowly, blinking at him, her movements cautious. He looked over his shoulder. Hungry? She hesitated. You made food? A faint smile touched his lips. Humans eat every morning, and from now on you will too. She crawled closer, still wary. When he handed her the small plate, she stared at it like it was some strange, priceless artifact. The first bite made her eyes widen in surprise. It's warm, she said softly. That's the point. They sat in silence for a while, the hum of the engine and the faint ticking of a clock filling the air. Then in a trembling voice she asked the question that had been hanging between them. Why did you buy me? Rowan froze, placing the pan down carefully. He turned to face her, his eyes steady and serious. Because no one else would have helped you. But I'm not human, she said, her voice small, almost a whisper. I'm nothing. You're someone, Rowan corrected her, his voice firm. And from now on no one calls you nothing again. Her lower lip trembled. She looked down at her plate, whispering, They said, my kind are tools, just broken things. If we cry, they say we waste air. Rowan knelt beside her, making sure she was looking at him. Listen to me, you breathe, you eat, you cry, that means you're alive, and anything that's alive deserves to be cared for. For a long moment she didn't move. Then slowly she nodded. The ship's AI interrupted again, its voice now tinged with something resembling caution. Captain, multiple Dominion patrols have been detected entering Velkar orbit. Their scanners show active slave mark beacons. The child carries one. Rowan cursed under his breath. They're tracking her. Shall I activate the ship's defense systems? Not yet. First we need to remove that beacon. He turned to Lyra, his voice gentle but urgent. Show me your collar. Fear flashed in her eyes. They'll find me if you touch it. He shook his head. They already are. But we're going to fix that. He carefully examined the metallic ring around her neck. Tiny blinking lights marked the Dominion's control signature. He fetched a small toolkit and gently began working, each click of the tools echoing through the tense silence of the cabin. As he worked, she whispered, You'll get in trouble because of me. Rowan managed a faint smile. Trouble and I are old friends. After several tense minutes, there was a soft snap. The collar loosened and fell away. Lyra gasped, her small hands flying to her neck, touching the bare skin as if she couldn't believe it was real. It's gone, she said in awe. Rowan picked up the collar and without a word crushed it under his boot. Not anymore. Eve's voice returned. Signal lost, beacon terminated. Dominion Patrol will likely investigate the last known location within hours. Then we're leaving. Rowan returned to the pilot seat, strapping himself in. Eve, prepare jump coordinates, get us off this rock. Destination? Anywhere far from here. The engines roared to life with a low, powerful hum. The ship's walls vibrated softly as energy built in the core. Lyra clung to the armrest, her eyes wide as the stars outside the viewport streaked into lines of brilliant light. As the Wayfarer lifted into the sky, the city below shrank into a smear of dust and distant light. Lyra stared out at the disappearing planet, then whispered, They can't find me now? Rowan looked straight ahead, his hand steady on the controls. Not unless they want to fight. And for the first time she smiled, a small fragile smile like the first rays of dawn breaking through a storm. He returned it with a faint grin of his own. Welcome to the stars, Lyra. She leaned closer to the window, her reflection glowing faintly in the starlight. They're so big, she whispered, her voice full of wonder. Yeah, Rowan said softly. But so is freedom. The Wayfarer disappeared into the endless black, leaving behind the planet of chains and cruelty. For the first time in her small life, Lyra slept without fear, while a man haunted by his own ghosts silently promised to protect her from the vast, uncaring universe itself. The stars outside the window stretched into long, silver lines as the wayfarer cut through the silent darkness of deep space. Inside the ship, everything was calm. Almost too calm. The only sounds were the low, steady hum of the engine and the soft, shallow breaths of a child who hadn't yet grasped that she was finally free. For 2 whole days, Lyra barely spoke. She made a small den for herself under the metal table near the storage bay, wrapped in the same worn jacket Captain Rowan Hale had given her. Every time the ship groaned or shuddered, she would flinch, her small hands clutching the fabric tighter, as if it were a shield. Rowan pretended not to notice at first. He was well acquainted with fear. He knew that trust wasn't something you could demand. It had to be earned, built slowly and carefully like mending a broken wing. He sat at the console, sipping a bitter brew from a steel cup, his gaze drifting over the blinking lights of the navigation panel. His tired eyes flickered to the security camera feed, watching the small, huddled figure in the corner, half asleep. He keyed the ship's internal comms, his voice coming through the speakers with a gentle rumble. "You know, Lyra, hiding won't do much good. This ship's got no monsters, just one grumpy old human and one very talkative AI." Lyra peeked out from under the table, her small face pale and uncertain. You can see me?" Rowan allowed a faint smile to touch his lips. "The ship sees everything, but don't worry. It only watches to keep us safe." From the overhead speakers, a calm, synthetic voice spoke, smooth as polished steel. "Affirmative. Safety is my primary directive. Hello, Lyra." The little girl blinked, her head tilting as she looked up toward the source of the sound. "Who is that?" Rowan answered. "That's Eve. She runs the ship. Think of her as a friend who lives in the walls," Eve added gently. "I monitor life support, atmospheric pressure, internal temperature, and navigational arrays. And I make sure Captain Rowan eats his vegetables." That drew a sound from Lyra, a soft, shy giggle. Rowan turned in his chair. It was the first time he'd heard her make a sound of joy. He took that small, fleeting noise as a victory, a crack in the ice. Later, he found her sitting by the main viewport staring out at the river of stars. The cosmic light reflected in her large, curious blue eyes, and for a moment the fear was gone, replaced by simple wonder. "Pretty, huh?" he said, walking over to join her. She nodded slowly, her gaze still fixed on the celestial display. "I never saw them this close. On Threx 9, the sky was always dark. The air just smelled like metal and dust." Rowan leaned against the bulkhead, his arms crossed. "That's because the Dominion doesn't want its people looking up. They want them looking down, at their chains." Lyra turned to him then, her small voice quiet, almost lost in the hum of the ship. "Why did they chain me? I didn't do anything wrong." He took a slow, heavy breath. "How do you explain cruelty to a child? Some people, they see others as things, not people. They think power gives them the right to do whatever they want. But they're wrong, Lyra. They're just broken." Her eyes softened with a wisdom that didn't belong to a child her age. "Humans don't do that." Rowan hesitated, the truth catching in his throat. "Some do, but most of us, we try to be better. We try." She studied his face for a long moment, her gaze intense. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "You're different." He managed a small, self-deprecating smile. "Old, maybe, but not different." She shook her head, her expression serious. "No, you feel warm, like sunlight." The words hit him harder than a plasma blast. He looked away, busying himself by pretending to adjust the viewport's polarization filter. For years, he'd felt nothing but a gnawing cold inside, a hollowness left by loss and a long, lonely war. But this small alien child, barely 8 years old by his guess, was starting to melt the ice around his heart with a single, simple sentence. That night, while Rowan was elbows deep in the ship's engine core, running a diagnostic on the primary energy converter, something strange happened. The maintenance lights flickered erratically, then stabilized with a hum that was just a half tone off from normal. He frowned, wiping grease from his hands. Eve, he called out. Are you rerouting power? I didn't authorize any adjustments. Negative, Captain. Eve's voice replied instantly. I detect an unknown energy input into the auxiliary grid. The source is localized. Rowan grabbed a handheld scanner from his belt and followed the anomalous readings. The energy signature was faint, but stable. The trail led him out of engineering and straight to the mess hall, where Lyra sat quietly, her back to him. Her small hand was pressed flat against the metal wall, and the paneling around her fingers pulsed with a faint, ethereal blue light. Rowan froze in the doorway, the scanner clattering from his suddenly numb fingers. His heart pounded in his chest. Start of narration. The metallic deck of The Wayfarer hummed with a low, constant vibration, the only companion Rowan had known for the better part of a decade. He watched the passenger, a girl named Lyra, who moved with the nervous energy of a cornered animal. He'd found her drifting in a derelict escape pod, a ghost in the silent void, marked only by a strange brand on her wrist. Since bringing her aboard, she'd barely spoken, her eyes wide with a fear that seemed permanently etched into her features. She would often just stand there, her hand hovering inches from the ship's inner hull, a strange listening expression on her face. He had initially dismissed it as a trauma response, a byproduct of whatever horrors she had escaped. But then, the ship's diagnostics started acting up. Minor, almost unnoticeable glitches, a flicker in the life support monitor here, a dip in the energy readings there. Nothing critical, but unusual. The Wayfarer was an old vessel, but she was reliable. She didn't have quirks. Today something was different. Lyra wasn't just hovering near the wall. She had her palm pressed flat against it, her eyes closed in deep concentration. Rowan watched her for a moment, his brow furrowed. He raised a handheld diagnostic scanner, its soft blue light casting long shadows across the corridor. The scanner was meant to detect energy fluctuations, microfractures in the hull, anything out of the ordinary. As he pointed it toward Lyra, the device, which had been emitting a soft, steady beep, suddenly shrieked. The readings on its small screen went wild, a chaotic dance of light and numbers he'd never seen before. At the sound, Lyra jumped, yanking her hand back from the wall as if it had burned her. Her breath hitched and she turned to face him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I didn't mean to, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. She hugged her arms to her chest, trying to make herself smaller. It talks to me. Rowan stared, the scanner's alarm still ringing in his ears. He silenced it with a flick of his thumb, the sudden quiet feeling heavy and profound. The ship? He asked, his voice low, trying not to startle her further. She gave a small, jerky nod. The fear in her eyes was now mixed with a desperate plea for him to understand. It whispers, she explained, her voice trembling. Not in words, not like you and me, it's more like feelings I can feel when it's content, warm, safe. But sometimes it's scared. I can hear it. Rowan slowly lowered the scanner, his mind racing. The readings had been off the charts, some kind of neural resonance he couldn't even begin to comprehend. It wasn't an energy leak or a structural fault. The scanner had been reading her, or rather, some kind of interaction between her and the ship. This girl wasn't just a survivor from some backwater colony. She wasn't just an alien species he hadn't encountered before. She was something else entirely. Something new. He remembered the first aid scan he'd done when he brought her aboard. The strange biological markers he couldn't identify. He had assumed they were just part of her species' unique physiology. But this was different. This was a connection that defied physics as he knew it. He took a careful step closer, his voice gentle. Did they teach you that? He asked. The people you were with before? Her face crumpled, and a single tear traced a path down her cheek. Her voice shook with a pain that felt old and deep. No, she whispered. They said I was broken, defective. They tried to make me stop hearing it. They hurt me to make it stop. Rowan's stomach tightened into a cold, hard knot. His gaze flickered to her wrist, to the ugly, scarred brand seared into her skin. He recognized it now, not from a public database but from hushed whispers in shadowy starports, the mark of the Dominion's clandestine genetic labs. They were infamous for their cruel experiments, their relentless pursuit of biological weaponry and hybrid soldiers. Now it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. She wasn't just a refugee. She was an escapee, an experiment. He moved to sit on a low utility crate beside her, making sure his movements were slow and non-threatening. He wouldn't frighten her. Not anymore. "Lyra," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You're not broken." She looked at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and a fragile, flickering hope. "You're special," he continued, meeting her gaze. "You can feel things, hear things that others can't. That's a gift. That's not something you ever need to hide." She looked up at him, her wide, shining eyes searching his for any sign of deception. You really think so?" she asked, her voice small. A genuine, soft smile touched Rowan's lips for the first time in what felt like years. "Yeah," he said warmly. "I really do. And listen to me. I won't let anyone hurt you again. You're safe here." As if on cue, the calm, synthesized voice of the ship's AI, Eve, chimed in quietly through the comms. "Captain, shall I update her status in the ship's manifest? From passenger to crew member?" Rowan let out a short, surprised chuckle. Even the ship's AI seemed to be in on it. "Yeah, Eve," he replied, a new lightness in his voice. "Make it official." Lyra gasped, her eyes widening in astonishment. "Crew," she repeated, the word foreign and unbelievable on her tongue. Like you?" "Exactly like me," Rowan confirmed, his smile broadening. He extended a hand, not to scan her but to welcome her. "Welcome aboard, Engineer Lyra." And then, a sound filled the quiet corridor that Rowan hadn't heard since he'd been alone. It was the sound of Lyra laughing. It wasn't a small, timid chuckle. It was a free, unburdened laugh that echoed off the metal walls, clear and bright like a bell ringing in the still air of space. It was the sound of a cage door swinging open. Hours later, Rowan finally retired to his own quarters, the exhaustion of the day settling deep in his bones. But it was a good kind of tired. As he lay in his bunk, a soft sound drifted from the adjacent room where Lyra was staying. She was humming. It wasn't a tune he recognized, it was something melodic and strange, undeniably alien, yet filled with a sweetness and a profound sense of hope that resonated deep within him. He listened, and a strange thing happened. The hum of her voice seemed to blend perfectly with the steady, rhythmic pulse of the ship's engines. It was as if the Wayfarer itself was listening, and in its own mechanical way, humming back to her. A duet between a girl and a machine, a symphony of connection in the vast, lonely dark. Rowan closed his eyes, letting that beautiful, hopeful sound fill the hollow spaces in his heart. The spaces where grief and loneliness had lived for so long. For years he had drifted alone among the silent stars, a solitary captain carrying the ghosts of his past. But now, for the very first time, his ship didn't feel empty. It felt like a home. Outside the viewport, the distant stars seemed to glow just a little brighter, as if the universe itself had paused to notice this one small act of kindness, this one connection forged in the middle of nowhere. And somewhere deep in the ship's core, in the heart of the engine room where no human eye could see, something began to stir. Faint, ethereal pulses of soft blue light began to form, tracing the pathways of the energy conduits. They pulsed in time with Lyra's humming, a silent response to her presence. It was an awakening, something ancient, something powerful, something that had been long asleep within the ship's very soul. The silent passenger was no longer silent. And the Wayfarer was no longer just a ship, it was alive. The Wayfarer drifted silently between the stars, It had been days since Rowan rescued Lyra from the slave market, yet the memory of that place still clung to her like a shadow. Sometimes, she'd wake in the middle of the night, gasping, her small voice whispering, "Don't take me back." And every single time, Rowan would sit by her side, a silent guardian, until the fear subsided and she fell asleep again. But lately something new had begun to happen. The child who once hid under tables now walked the ship with a gentle, blooming curiosity. She'd trace the lines on the metal walls with her small fingers, talk softly to the ship's systems as if they were old friends, and laugh, a sound like tiny bells. When Eve, the ship's AI, told her stories about old Earth, there were once great ships that sailed only on water. Eve's calm voice explained one night. Humans called them explorers. Lyra's eyes, wide and luminous, fixed on the star-dusted view screen. Like us? From his command chair, Rowan smiled. Exactly like us. But deep down, a heavy truth settled in his gut. They weren't like anyone else, especially her. That morning, while checking the ship's logs, Rowan stumbled upon something that made the hair on his arm stand up. The navigation system was hiding encrypted files, transmissions from the Zarth Dominion labs. Eve confirmed the signals were old, likely fragments pulled from the collar Lyra had been wearing. "Captain," Eve reported, her voice devoid of emotion. "These records mention something called Project Seraph." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Play it." A broken voice, mangled by static, crackled through the speakers. "Hybridization trial, number 47, combining human DNA with Zarth energy receptors. Subject survived, unstable emotional output, shut down, ordered." Then, nothing but the hum of the ship. Silence. Rowan froze, the words echoing in his mind. Human DNA? He turned, his gaze falling upon the sleeping child on the couch. Her small form was wrapped in a blanket, her soft blue skin glowing faintly in the dim light of the console. The file made his hands tremble. She wasn't just an alien child from some forgotten world. She was part human. When Lyra finally woke, she found Rowan sitting nearby, staring blankly at the screen. She shifted, her voice small. "Did I do something wrong?" He looked up, forcing a calm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "No, kid, not at all. But I think we need to talk about where you came from." She tilted her head, a familiar gesture of confusion. "Threx 9? "Before that," he said gently. Her eyes darkened, a cloud passing over them. "I don't remember much, only bright lights, and people in silver clothes. They said I was made wrong." Rowan's throat felt tight, a knot of anger and pity forming in his chest. He wanted to tell her everything about the file, the human DNA, the monstrous experiment, but the words caught. How could he burden her with that? He stood, pacing the small bridge. "Lyra, they didn't make you wrong. They made you different. They were trying to play gods, mixing things they didn't understand." Her brow furrowed. "Different like broken?" He knelt beside her, meeting her gaze. "No. Different like special. You're proof that humans and others, that we can be one. That we can share something much greater than just blood." She blinked, processing his words. "You mean, I'm part human?" He managed a nod. "Yes. I think that's why you understand my words so easily. Why the ship seems to listen to you. It's in your code, Lyra. In your very being." Her small fingers touched her chest, right over her heart. A long moment passed before she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Then, does that mean you're my family?" The question was a blade and a blessing, all at once. It pierced through years of solitude and loss, hitting something he thought was long dead. For a moment he couldn't speak. Then, the words came, softer than he intended. "If you want me to be." A fragile, beautiful smile broke across her face. "I want that." Later, as they ate a simple meal of soup and bread, Rowan found himself studying her eyes. They weren't just blue. In the right light, flecks of green and brown shimmered within them, human colors hidden just beneath the surface. And when she laughed, it was the purest sound of life he'd ever heard. It wasn't created in a lab. It was born from something real, something true. He found himself speaking quietly, almost to himself. They tried to build a weapon, but instead they made a child. Eve's voice joined him softly. Captain, the Dominion will not let such an experiment simply vanish. They will come for her. Rowan nodded grimly, his gaze fixed on the endless sea of stars. Let them come. This time humanity fights for one of its own. That night the nightmares returned, but this time they weren't for Rowan. Lyra tossed and turned, whispering broken words in her sleep. Please stop, don't make me go in the light again. Rowan was at her side in an instant. He shook her gently. Lyra, wake up, you're safe. Her eyes snapped open, and for a split second they blazed with a brilliant, intense blue light. The ship's lights flickered in unison as if responding directly to her heartbeat, before everything returned to normal. Rowan watched, stunned into silence. Eve, did you see that? Confirmed, Captain. Her biological energy levels spiked for 1.7 seconds. The origin is unknown. Lyra clung to him, her small body shaking. I saw them again. The ones in the white room, they hurt the other children. They said I was lucky because I survived. Rowan's hands trembled as he held her close, a storm of protectiveness raging inside him. You're not in that place anymore. You hear me? You're with me. You're safe. She buried her face in his chest, her voice muffled. Why do they hate us? He looked out the viewport at the cold, distant stars. Because they're afraid, he said, his voice low and firm. They're afraid of what they can't control. But you don't need their approval to exist, Lyra. You just need to live. Her small hand gripped his sleeve, a silent anchor. Then I'll live with you. He managed a faint smile. That's the deal. When she finally drifted back to a peaceful sleep, Rowan returned to the control room. His reflection stared back at him in the dark glass. An aging man, scarred by war, now the sole protector of the most valuable secret in the galaxy. A living, breathing bridge between two species. He whispered to himself, the words a vow to the empty void. If humanity means anything, it's this. Outside, the wayfarer glided silently through the darkness, carrying its strange and precious family. The stars shimmered like countless eyes watching from afar, some old, some new, all bearing witness to a quiet promise made in the deep of space. A human would protect the child they called broken, until the day the galaxy learned what real humanity truly meant. The little alien girl, Lyra, sat on the floor, curled up beside the co-pilot's seat, with Rowan's old jacket draped around her shoulders. She loved this spot. From here, she could see everything that mattered. The vastness of space through the window, the steady presence of the captain, and the comforting blue glow from under the console. It was her safe haven. The ship, the wayfarer, hummed around her like a great, calm animal. Lyra closed her eyes, listening. The hum had a rhythm, a steady, warm pulse like a big, sleeping heart. But then, very slowly, that rhythm changed. A thin, cold shiver ran through the metal deck beneath her. Lyra's eyes snapped open. They are coming, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Captain Rowan Hale looked up from the controls, his brow furrowed. Where are you, Lyra? Here, she answered, raising a small hand from the floor. By your chair. I can feel the ship shaking inside. Before Rowan could respond, the ship's AI, Eve, cut in with her perfectly level voice. Captain, 3 Dominion patrol craft approaching from high starboard. Range 6 minutes, they are scanning for slave beacon residue. Lyra pressed her hand flat against the hull. She could taste the scan in her mind. A horrible sensation like cold needles touching warm skin. It made her stomach twist. She pulled the jacket tighter around her small frame, a fragile shield against the encroaching fear. Rowan slid his chair back and knelt on the deck, bringing himself eye to eye with her. His gaze was firm but kind. "Listen to me, small one. You buckle in here beside me. I need to see you. And I need you to see me." She nodded and climbed into the large co-pilot seat. He carefully fixed the straps over her. Her feet dangled high above the floor, a feeling she hated. Noticing her discomfort, he gently tucked the oversized jacket around her legs so they wouldn't swing. It helped. "Eve," Rowan said, standing up, his voice all business now. "Cut lights, mute transponders, silent mode." Silent mode active, power drawn to shields. Heat signature masked. The cabin instantly dimmed to a deep red hush. The only sounds left were the soft pulse of the engines and the quick, shallow sound of Lyra's breathing. Suddenly, a harsh, metallic voice crackled through the speaker, shattering the quiet. "Unregistered vessel. This is Dominion Patrol Theta 9. You carry stolen property of the Genetic Division. Surrender the subject at once and live." Lyra's tiny fingers dug into the armrest. She couldn't stop the image flashing in her head. The sterile white room, the cold metal table, the rough hands that held her down. Her breath caught in her chest, coming in fast, small gasps. Rowan pressed the comm button. His voice was like iron. "This is Captain Rowan Hale. There is no property here. There is a child, and she is under human protection." There was a moment of static, then a dry, cruel laugh echoed through the cabin. "A human defending failed meat. You forget your place, old man." Rowan's tone dropped, becoming slow and heavy with unspoken anger. "You chained a child. Humanity breaks chains." He cut the channel, silencing the hateful voice. Lyra looked at him, her throat tight with unshed tears. "Will they take me?" she asked, her voice trembling. He shook his head, his expression resolute. "They will try, and we will answer." Just then, another shiver ran through the hull. Lyra closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, the way she had learned to do during quiet nights adrift in space. The ship was afraid. She could feel its fear as a deep, resonant tremor. She laid both her palms flat on the cool surface of the console and began to breathe in fours, just like Rowan had taught her. Breathe in for 4, hold, and breathe out for 4. "Hello, Wayfarer," she whispered to the ship. "It's me. I'm right here. Don't be scared. We are together." Eve's voice spoke, but this time it was different. It was softer, tinged with something that sounded almost like curiosity. "Captain, power variance detected near the auxiliary grid. Source appears to be Lyra." Rowan didn't take his eyes off the main screen where 3 menacing dots were closing in. "Let her," he said simply. The first blast came without warning. A white spear of plasma streaked past the bow, so close it lit up the entire cockpit. The cabin jolted violently, and a shower of sparks hissed down from an overhead panel. "Hold on," Rowan grunted, his hands firm on the flight yoke. "Eve, pattern Delta. Now." "Executing." Rowan rolled the ship hard to port. The starfield outside the window flipped upside down. Lyra's stomach flipped with it, but she kept her palms pressed firmly on the console. In her mind, she pictured a strong, shining rope, tying her small, racing heartbeat to the ship's big, steady one. And as she held that thought, the ship's trembling hum began to steady. "Shields at 70%, Eve reported calmly. 2 bogies on pursuit vector." A tired smile touched the corner of Rowan's mouth. "Let's make them work for it." The hunters fired again. Blinding light slammed into the shields. The cabin shook so hard Lyra's teeth clicked together. Rowan grunted with the effort, fighting the spin, and expertly sliced the Wayfarer through a dense cluster of dark rocks drifting in space. "An old ore field," he said, a hint of relief in his voice. "Good cover." Lyra could feel the rocks, too, their cold, patient, heavy presence all around them. But she could also feel the shape of the hunters' minds. They were sharp, like knives. They were relentless, cruel, and they were getting closer. "I can hide us," she said suddenly, her voice clear and sure. "Not our bodies, the echo they're smelling." Rowan risked a quick glance at her, his eyes wide with surprise. "Do it." She pulled the jacket sleeve down over her hands and pressed harder against the console. In her head, she found two strands of light, the ship's own warm, vital signature, and the cold, needle-like light of the slave beacon they were tracking. She gently crossed them, and then, with a push of her will, she sent the cold needle light drifting outward away from the ship, past the rocks and into the empty dark. Eve's tone lifted a fraction, a mechanical flicker of success. Beacon residue reduced by 92%. Decoy drift established. On the tactical scope, one of the enemy blips broke off from the chase, speeding after the false echo. Two remained. Rowan's fingers danced over the weapon controls, a predatory gleam in his eyes. One less problem. A single shot snapped from the Wayfarer's forward cannons. Blue fire lanced through the darkness and struck the nearest hunter's wing. The enemy ship staggered, spun out of control, and vanished into the rock field in a small, silent, brilliant bloom of light. Lyra flinched at the sight of the silent explosion. A new, strange feeling twisted inside her. Did it die? She whispered. Start with a soft, atmospheric, slightly mysterious tone. Have you ever felt a connection to something inanimate? A favorite car that seemed to have a personality, or a house that felt like it was breathing around you? What if that connection was real? What if it could save your life? Today we're diving into a story where a ship isn't just a machine, but a living, breathing entity, and a child's strange gift becomes the key to survival in the cold, unforgiving vacuum of space. Music swells slightly, becoming more dramatic. The scene is tense. The starship Wayfarer is under attack. Alarms are blaring. Rowan, the ship's captain, is a hardened veteran. His voice steady even as the world around him goes crooked. No one dies who has a choice, he says, his words cutting through the chaos. They made this fight. We make our choice to end it fast. Just then, the last enemy hunter dives in, guns blazing. A blast hits the Wayfarer's side. The ship shudders violently. Damage? Rowan barks, his knuckles white on the controls. The ship's AI, Eve, responds with chilling precision. Hull breach, aft corridor, shield at 41. The situation is critical. The shields are failing. Rowan makes a decision that would terrify most captains. His jaw sets like stone. Divert from life support. Eve hesitates, its synthesized voice laced with something like concern. Captain. But Rowan cuts it off. Do it. Instantly the lights dim, plunging the bridge into near darkness. A young girl, Lyra, can feel the change deep in her bones. She hears the ship's very breath thin out, the life support systems groaning as their power is rerouted. It's a desperate gamble. This is where the story takes a turn you won't expect. Lyra, this small child on the bridge of a dying ship, does something incredible. She pictures the ship's systems not as circuits and wires but as lungs. She imagines her own small hands cupping those lungs, gently squeezing them in a steady rhythm. Leaning forward, she whispers to the ship itself, as if it were a frightened friend. Breathe with me, she says, in hold out. And the ship responds. The low hum of the engines deepens, stabilizing. The flickering emergency lights stop their frantic dance and hold steady. Eve, the logical, data-driven AI, sounds almost amazed. Stability regained. Unknown child ship resonance continuing. A connection, a resonance, something beyond science and engineering is happening. Lyra is breathing for the ship and the ship is breathing with her. Rowan doesn't question it. He sees his chance. His voice is calm now but laced with ice. Good, he says. Time to finish. He pushes the Wayfarer into a daring maneuver, sliding under the enemy ship's belly, then snapping up and across its nose. The ship, now seemingly alive and eager under his command, moves with a grace it didn't have before. Lyra can feel its joy, its exhilaration, like a bird suddenly remembering it has wings and can soar. It's a beautiful, deadly dance in the void. Rowan murmurs, now, and taps the trigger. It's not a barrage of frantic shots. It's two, perfectly placed. The first shot cracks the hunter's shield like thin ice on a winter morning. The second punches straight through to its engine, For a silent moment, the enemy ship blossoms into a flower of pure white light, and then simply fades to dust. Silence returns to the bridge, but it's not the terrifying silence of imminent doom. It's a soft, gentle quiet, the quiet of survival. Rowan lets out a long, slow breath, his hands finally loosening their grip on the controls. He turns to Lyra, his gaze intense. "Where are you now?" he asks, his voice softer than she's ever heard it. She looks up at him, a small, proud smile touching her lips. "Still here. Beside you." In that moment, everything changes. He reaches over and taps the edge of her seat, a gesture of profound acceptance. "Good. That is where crew sits." Lyra's eyes shine, filled with a hope she thought was lost. "I am crew?" she asks, her voice barely a whisper. Rowan's answer is simple, but it carries the weight of everything they just went through. "You are the reason we are breathing," he says. "So yes, crew." As if on cue, Eve's gentle chime fills the bridge. "Confirmed. Updating manifest. Engineer Lyra. Status active. An official title. A place to belong." A tiny laugh escapes Lyra, shaky and new, like a leaf in the wind. She looks out the viewport at the silent, drifting rocks of the ore field. The ship's hum is warm now, a comforting presence, but the danger isn't gone forever. "Will they come back?" she asks, her voice small again. Rowan stares out at the endless sea of stars, his expression weary but resolute. "Maybe. Hunters always do." Lyra doesn't flinch. She slides her small hand over the console, a silent promise to the ship, and then reaches one finger towards the captain's hand. He gently wraps his larger hand around hers, a silent pact between them. "Then I will be here," she says, her voice firm with newfound purpose. He nods, a silent echo of her promise. "And so will I." And so the story ends, for now. Outside, the silent asteroids turn slowly in the starlight. Inside, a man, a child, and a living ship breathe together as one. 3 small hearts in a vast, hard universe ready to face whatever comes next together. Smoke, gray and acrid, curled from a cracked panel just above the cockpit. Through the viewport, the vast ore field turned with a silent, cosmic slowness. Massive gray stones, scarred and ancient, drifted like old whales in the dark sea of space. Inside the Wayfarer, the air was thick with the smell of hot, stressed metal. Rowan Hale, his hands surprisingly steady, scanned the gauges. His knuckles were scraped raw, and a thin, bright line of blood snaked down his wrist, disappearing into the cuff of his sleeve. He kept his voice even. "Eve, report." The ship's AI responded, her tone as calm as a placid lake. "Minor hull breach has been sealed, Captain. The starboard thruster is operating at 50% capacity. Our shield grid is unstable, and the jump core is unhappy." Rowan managed a tired, curious smile. "Unhappy?" "It's a technical term," Eve replied, a ghost of humor in her synthesized voice. "It means don't touch it yet, Captain." In the co-pilot's seat, a small alien girl named Lyra sat bolt upright, dwarfed by Rowan's old flight jacket wrapped around her shoulders. She watched the silent dance of the drifting stones, her large eyes filled with a wisdom beyond her apparent years. She placed both palms flat against the console. The ship's internal hum was weak, shaky, and discordant. She didn't like it. "Hello, Wayfarer," she whispered, her voice a soft melody. "I am here. Breathe with me. In. Hold. Out." As she spoke, the ship's hum seemed to respond. It smoothed out, the frantic vibrations softening into a more stable thrum. It wasn't perfect, but it was undeniably better. A small, satisfied smile touched Lyra's lips. Rowan's gaze fell to his wrist, to the telltale smear of red. He instinctively tugged at his sleeve, a futile attempt to hide the injury. But Lyra saw everything. "You are hurt," she stated simply. "It's nothing," he said, the words automatic, dismissive. She reached across the console, her small, warm fingers gently touching his hand. A soft blue light, like captured moon water, gathered beneath her skin. As she held his wrist, the cut miraculously closed, the blood fading away, until only a pale, thin line remained as a memory. Rowan blinked, staring at his healed skin. "Thank you," he breathed, the words full of a quiet awe he was getting used to. "You keep me safe," she said, her logic simple and profound. "I keep you safe." Before he could find a reply, Eve's voice cut through the quiet moment, her tone dropping low, urgent. "Captain, a large mass is entering the sector. Signature identified. Dominion. It's a carrier, not a standard patrol craft." Rowan's mouth tightened into a thin, hard line. "The Dominion. Here? They sent a carrier all the way out to a dead ore field?" "Affirmative," Eve confirmed. "And its hangars are opening." Lyra's small shoulders tensed. "The knives are coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Drones," Rowan translated, his mind already racing through impossible calculations. "Lots of them." 12 have launched, Eve reported. "They are deploying in a wide scanning pattern. Their sensors will be sniffing for heat signatures and active beacon sense." Rowan stared out at the silent stone giants. There was no escape. "We can't outrun a carrier with a sick thruster and a sulking jump core." His gaze shifted to Lyra. An idea, born of desperation and a sliver of hope, began to form. Lyra slid from her seat and knelt on the deck, pressing her ear to the cold metal plating. She closed her eyes, listening to something Rowan couldn't hear. "The rocks sing," she said after a long moment. "It's a very slow song, very deep, like old drums beating in the dark." Rowan watched her, his hope solidifying. "Lyra," he asked, his voice low and intense, "can you make us sing like that?" She didn't answer with words, she simply closed her eyes. The ship's weak hum, which she had soothed moments before, began to bend and shift under her focused will. The frequency dropped, slowing, deepening, until it was almost a subsonic vibration. It became a perfect mimicry of the ore field's ancient silent song. On Rowan's console, the ship's bright energy signature on the display flickered, then dulled to almost nothing. "Profile reduced," Eve whispered, her voice barely a digital sigh. "To their sensors, we now appear to be just another cold, dead stone." The first drone, a thin black knife of a ship, drifted past their viewport. Its single malevolent red eye blinked once, sweeping over them without a flicker of recognition, before moving on. Rowan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Good girl," he murmured. 3 more drones passed by, then 5. They were going to make it. They were invisible. But then one of the drones slowed. It turned, its movements sharp and predatory, and came back. It stopped directly in front of the Wayfarer, so close Rowan could see the scratches on its dark plating, its red eye staring directly at them. "It sees us," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. The drone fired. A small, brilliant bite of light shot from its forward cannon. The projectile struck the hull near the aft corridor, and a dull, concussive boom rolled through the ship. A panel blew inward. A bright snake of fire erupted, rushing along a power cable. "Stay buckled," Rowan yelled, already running towards the danger. But Lyra unbuckled anyway, following him, her bare feet silent on the metal deck. The corridor was already choked with thick, black smoke. Rowan grabbed a foam canister from the wall and sprayed, but the fire was aggressive, darting around the white cloud and climbing the wall like a living thing. "Eve, seal the vents. Cut the oxygen," he coughed, the smoke stinging his eyes and lungs. "Sealing now," the AI confirmed. The flame, starved for air, sucked inward, and then snapped outward with a final, desperate gasp, catching Rowan's sleeve. He jerked back, losing his balance, and hit the floor hard. A sharp, searing pain flashed through his side, stealing his breath. Through the haze of smoke and pain, he saw Lyra step in front of him. She looked so small, and she was shaking, but her face was set with fierce determination. She lifted both her hands towards the fire, and her eyes began to glow with that same intense blue light. "Ship," she commanded, her voice ringing with an impossible authority. "No air here." The ship seemed to obey her directly. A sudden hiss filled the corridor, a rush of clear, cold wind as the atmospheric regulators vented the remaining oxygen into space. The fire shrank instantly, guttering and flickering before dying completely. All that remained were the glowing red embers of fried wires like sleeping snakes in the dark. Rowan pulled himself up, clutching his ribs. He looked at Lyra and gave a pained, grateful nod. "Smart. Very smart. Thank you." Lyra's gaze was fixed on his face, her expression clouded with worry. "You are hurt inside," she said softly. "I'll live," he managed, his breath tight and shallow. Just then Eve's calm, measured tone returned, cutting through the aftermath. "Captain, the drone is hailing us. Warning, more drones approaching. Carrier charging main gun, firing solution in 3 minutes." The cold, robotic voice of the ship's AI, Eve, cut through the tension in the cockpit. Rowan frowned, his knuckles white on the controls. A main gun in an ore field? That's bold. "Their beam will shatter many rocks. And us," Eve replied, her tone as flat as the void outside. Rowan's eyes darted to a side viewport. A colossal iron boulder, a forgotten relic of some long-gone mining operation, turned slowly in the blackness. Faint white numbers, the ghost of a stenciled past, were still visible on its pitted surface. An idea, desperate and wild, sparked in his mind. He turned to Lyra, the small, quiet child beside him. "Can you help me push that stone?" Lyra looked up, her expression unreadable. "I am small," she said, her voice a soft whisper. "You are small," Rowan agreed, a gentle tone softening his voice. "But the ship is not." A flicker of understanding crossed her face. She gave a single, serious nod. Without another word, they raced to the cockpit. Rowan dropped into his command chair, his fingers flying across the console. "Eve, give me manual on the tractor beam." Lyra, hands on the console. "I need you to feel the lock." Lyra placed her small palms flat against the cool metal. She could feel the ship's external tractor arms through the interface, their energy fields wavering, weak and nervous under the strain. She closed her eyes and began to hum. A single, long, resonant note. A strange calm seemed to flow from her, through the console and into the very bones of the ship. The wavering arms steadied, locking into place with newfound strength. Rowan didn't question it. He aimed the tractor beam directly at the giant iron boulder. "On my mark," he said, his voice tight with concentration. "We are going to roll it right between us and that carrier. Mark in 3, 2, 1. Eve counted down with chilling precision. "Now!" Rowan slammed the actuator. A brilliant blue beam of energy shot out, grabbing hold of the massive asteroid. The boulder resisted, a stubborn titan, heavy and proud, refusing to yield. The wayfarer groaned under the immense strain, its metal frame protesting the impossible task. Lyra leaned forward, her eyes wide and bright with an otherworldly light. "Wayfarer, be strong now," she whispered, her voice carrying an impossible weight of command. "Lift." The ship's groans deepened, but it held. The boulder, inch by agonizing inch, began to turn. A fine snow of rust and rock dust drifted from its ancient face, a slow, silent rain in the vacuum of space. "Main gun charge at 90%, Eve warned, her voice cutting through the intense focus. Rowan's hands were rock steady on the controls. Almost there, just a little more. With a final shuddering effort, the boulder rolled into position, perfectly eclipsing the wayfarer from the enemy carrier, just as the hostile ship fired. A blinding spear of pale, destructive light stabbed through the darkness. But instead of vaporizing their hull, it met tons of solid iron. The impact was instantaneous and catastrophic. The boulder didn't just break, it exploded, shattering into a billion glittering knives of superheated shrapnel. The lethal cloud rushed outward, a man-made nebula of death. The carrier's shields flared violently as it was peppered by its own deflected and amplified attack. Its own escort drones, caught in the deadly crossfire, were shredded to pieces. Their small red sensor eyes went dark, one by one, like candles being snuffed out in the dark. Lyra gasped, her small shoulders shaking as she stared at the brilliant, deadly cloud they had created. The aftermath was both beautiful and terrifying. Rowan reached across the console and squeezed her jacketed arm, a firm, reassuring touch. "You did that," he said, his voice filled with awe. She shook her head, her gaze still fixed on the chaotic scene outside. "We did." A rare, fast smile flashed across Rowan's face. "Eve, is there a window for us?" "Now, Captain. Their sensors are completely blind for the next 8 seconds, Eve confirmed. "However, the jump core is still unhappy." The AI's voice held a note of mechanical frustration. Rowan glanced at Lyra. The question hung unspoken between them. "Can you make it less unhappy?" Lyra didn't answer with words. She simply closed her eyes and rested her forehead gently against the main console. A soft blue light, the same energy that had calmed the ship before, flowed from her hands into the metal. It started as a trickle, then surged into a steady, powerful river. The frantic, erratic pulse of the ship's damaged jump core, a rhythm of pure panic, began to slow. The chaotic beat smoothed out, becoming a strong, even heartbeat. "Core alignment achieved," Eve said, her voice filled with a quiet wonder that bordered on disbelief. "I do not know how she—" "Don't ask," Rowan cut her off gently. "Just take it." He gripped the jump lever, his knuckles stark white. With a firm pull, he engaged the drive. Space itself seemed to stretch thin as silk. The distant stars smeared into long, ethereal strands of white hair. The ore field, the menacing carrier, the wreckage of the broken drones, all of it fell away, tumbling backward into a forgotten memory as they plunged into the warp. Silence. A profound, deep silence that was more complete than the void they had left behind. Then, slowly, the soft, normal hum of the Wayfarer's systems returned. A comforting and familiar sound. The ship drifted in a calm, pale, milky white expanse of subspace. Rowan leaned back in his chair, a breath he didn't realize he was holding escaping in a shaky laugh. It was the sound of a man who had stared into the abyss and had, against all odds, been spared. Lyra, exhausted but safe, rested her head against his sleeve. "Where are we?" she asked softly. "Close to a safe lane," he said, his voice still rough with adrenaline. "There's a human outpost not far from here. If our luck holds." She listened, not just with her ears, but with that other sense she possessed, to the hum of the ship. It was tired, but it was happy. It was whole. "It will hold," she said with a certainty that belied her age. "We will hold it." Rowan looked down at her small, serious face, and for a moment he remembered. He remembered a crowded market on a dusty moon, the clink of a chain, and a desperate whisper. "Can you buy me and take me as your slave?" He looked at her hands now, resting open on her lap, not clenched in fear. There was no chain, no collar, only the faint, lingering memory of light. "Eve," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Set course for the outpost, slow and careful." A new warmth entered the AI's voice. "Course set, Captain, and welcome, Engineer Lyra, to the part of the sky called hope." For the first time since their ordeal began, Lyra smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. She pulled the oversized jacket higher around her shoulders and tucked her feet up onto the chair so they wouldn't swing. Outside the viewport, the pale lane of safe space shone like a promised road. Inside, a man, a child, and a ship breathed together as one. Fire had tried to consume them. The cruelty of others had tried to mark them for destruction. But the song they made together, a quiet song, small and human and impossibly brave, was louder, and it carried them onward, toward a new beginning. Thank you so much for watching our story today. If you enjoyed this journey aboard the Wayfarer, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more adventures. A quiet road opened in the endless dark, a pale lane of space. The Wayfarer, tired but proud, glided along it. Inside the cockpit, Captain Rowan Hale held the ship steady, one hand on the yoke, the other never far from the thruster dial. Beside him, small and still, sat Lyra. Rowan's own jacket was wrapped around her like a heavy blanket, a shield against the cold void outside. The ship's hum, once a ragged gasp, had settled into a calm, steady rhythm, like a deep breath after a desperate run. "Eve," Rowan said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet. "How far?" 2 hours to Helios Outpost," the ship's AI answered, her voice crisp and clear. "No pursuit detected on long-range scan." Lyra shifted, leaning her small frame toward the viewport. The stars out here looked different, friendlier somehow, their sharp points softened by distance and the promise of safety. "Is Helios safe?" she whispered, the question hanging in the air. Rowan nodded, his gaze fixed on the star field ahead. "As safe as people can make a place. Humans built it. We help each other there." She held on to that sentence, turning it over in her mind like a warm, smooth stone found on a shore she'd never seen. "We help each other," she repeated softly, a quiet echo of hope. They flew on, mostly in silence. The vastness of space was a comfortable companion now, not a threat. Sometimes Lyra would hum, a single, gentle tone that perfectly matched the ship's steady vibration, and sometimes the wayfarer seemed to hum back, just a little louder, a subtle acknowledgement, as if saying, "I hear you. You are part of me now." At last, a bright dot on the scanner began to resolve into something more: Helios Outpost. It grew from a distant spark into a magnificent ring of silver towers, gracefully wrapped around a small, blue-hued moon. Soft beacons blinked in a slow, welcoming rhythm, like the lighthouses of old Earth seas guiding lost ships home. "Helios Control. This is Wayfarer," Eve transmitted, her voice cutting through the cockpit's quiet hum. "Requesting approach. Low shields, minor external damage, medical assistance is not urgent." A moment of static, and then a human voice replied, warm but with an undercurrent of caution. "Wayfarer, we see your scars. We've got a bed for broken ships here. Come on in, slow and easy." A rare smile touched Rowan's lips. "Copy that, Helios." The Wayfarer settled onto Pad 12 with a gentle bump, the landing struts groaning as they took the ship's weight. The ramp lowered with a familiar sigh, and warm air rolled into the sterile cockpit. It was real air, thick with the scent of clean metal, lubricating oil, and something else. A faint, sweet smell of growing plants. Lyra closed her eyes and breathed it in, a long, deep breath of freedom. 2 guards waited at the bottom of the ramp. Their posture was relaxed but ready, not unfriendly, but certainly not foolish. Standing just behind them was a woman with a commanding presence. She wore a simple gray coat, her silver hair pulled back, and her eyes were the color of a clear winter sky. This was Commander Rena Voss. Her gaze swept over the ship, taking in the black scorch marks and pitted hull. "Rowan Hale," she said, her voice even. "You look like a man who wrestled a storm." Rowan managed a small, tired grin. "We took a few steps with it." Rena's sharp eyes then moved to the small figure half hidden behind him. Lyra's hands clutched Rowan's sleeve, but she didn't cower. Rena didn't reach out, didn't stare. She simply softened her voice. "And this?" Rowan's answer was simple, direct. "Lyra. She's a passenger, crew, a child." Rena held his gaze for a long moment, an entire conversation passing between them without a word. Then she gave a single, decisive nod. "Come inside." They walked through a transparent tunnel that curved into the heart of the outpost. It opened into a breathtaking sight, a massive garden dome filled with life. Real soil, low, leafy trees, and a narrow stream that gurgled over smooth stones. People moved with quiet purpose. Some wore tool belts, others carried data tablets. By the water, an old man sat tuning a stringed instrument, and he looked up as they passed, offering a gentle, welcoming smile. Lyra slowed her pace, her eyes wide with wonder. She had never seen a real tree before. The leaves were a vibrant green, small and delicate. Hesitantly, she stood on her toes and reached out, her fingers barely brushing against one. It was soft, like a whisper against her skin. "It remembers the sun," Rowan said quietly beside her. She turned to look at him, her expression one of profound awe, as if he had just shared the universe's greatest secret. Soon they were in a bright, clean office. Commander Rena listened intently as Rowan recounted their journey. He gave her the short, hard version, the brutal market, the cruel collar, the relentless patrols, the Dominion carrier, the terrifying chase through the ore field. He spoke plainly, without embellishment or a plea for pity. He stated facts. When he finished, Rena folded her hands on the desk in front of her. "The Dominion will come to our border," she said, her voice firm. "They'll use words like ownership and law to justify their actions." Rowan's reply was quiet, but it held the strength of forged iron. "They chained a child." Rena met his unwavering gaze, then tapped a command into her tablet. "Eve, send over the Wayfarer's ship logs from the attack. Also, prepare a manifest update." "Manifest ready?" Eve's voice chirped from a speaker in the room, sounding almost proud. "Engineer Lyra, status, active." Rena looked from the tablet to Lyra. "We have forms for guardianship. Human law likes its paperwork, but our law, here on Helios, always begins with a simple question." She turned her full attention to the child, her expression softening. "Do you want to stay with this man?" Lyra didn't look at the floor or her feet. She looked directly at Rowan. His face was etched with exhaustion, lined with the stress of the past few days, but his eyes were steady, a calm harbor. He waited, his posture open, not pushing, not demanding. He simply waited for her answer. "I do," she said, her voice small but clear. "Why?" Rena asked, her tone gentle. Lyra's answer was profound in its simplicity. "Because he listens. He does not call me thing. He says child. When I am afraid, he makes the world slow down so I can breathe. When the ship is afraid, he lets me help. He does not break what he means to protect." A genuine smile finally broke through Rena's stern demeanor. "Then we will simply write down what is already true." She signed the screen with a flourish and then slid a stylus across the desk to Rowan. "Sign, Captain." Rowan picked it up. His hand shook just once, and then it was still. He signed his name. They had barely a moment to let the reality of it sink in before a harsh alarm tone cut through the office. A tech shouted from the hallway, "Incoming widecast. Dominion relay. It's on the public channel." A cold, imperious voice, devoid of any warmth or humanity, suddenly filled the entire dome, echoing off the glass and steel. It was the voice of the Dominion, a chilling broadcast that promised their ordeal was far from over. The storm they had outrun was now gathering on the horizon, and Helios was its new target. The pale lane of space opened like a quiet road. The Wayfarer glided on it, tired but proud. Inside the cockpit, Rowan Hale kept one hand on the yoke and the other near the thruster dial. Lyra sat beside him, small and still, Rowan's jacket wrapped around her shoulders like a blanket. The ship's hum felt steady again, a calm, even breath after a long, frantic run. "Eve," Rowan said, his voice low and raspy. "How far?" 2 hours to Helios Outpost," the ship's AI answered, her voice a clean, reassuring tone in the small cabin. "No pursuit detected on long-range scan." Lyra leaned toward the viewport, her small form silhouetted against the starfield. The stars looked different here, softer somehow, less like cold, distant diamonds and more like friendly, flickering candles. "Is Helios safe?" she whispered, the question hanging in the air. Rowan nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "As safe as people can make a place. Humans built it. We help each other there." She held on to that sentence as if it were a warm stone in the cold of space. "We help each other," she repeated, tasting the words. They flew mostly in silence after that. The vast quiet was punctuated only by the ship's gentle thrum. Sometimes Lyra would hum along with the ship's engine, just one long, gentle tone, a perfect match. And sometimes it felt as if the wayfarer hummed back, just a little louder, as if to say, "I hear you." At last, the outpost grew from a bright, distant dot into a magnificent ring of silver towers wrapped around a small blue moon. Soft beacons blinked in a rhythmic, welcoming pattern, like the lighthouses of old seas guiding weary sailors home. "Helios Control, this is Wayfarer," Eve transmitted, her voice formal, but carrying an undercurrent of relief. "Requesting approach. We have low shields, minor hull damage, medical is not urgent." A human voice replied, warm but careful, professional. "Wayfarer, we see your scars. We've got a bed for broken ships. Come in slow." A genuine smile touched Rowan's lips for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "Copy that, Helios." The Wayfarer settled onto pad 12 with a gentle bump, the landing struts sighing as they took the ship's weight. The ramp lowered, and warm air rolled into the cockpit. Real air, filled with the scent of clean metal, lubricating oil, and something else. A faint, sweet smell of growing plants. Lyra closed her eyes and breathed it in, a deep, cleansing breath. Two guards waited at the bottom of the ramp. They didn't look unfriendly, but they didn't look foolish either. Their stances were relaxed but ready. Standing just behind them was a woman in a simple gray coat, her silver hair pulled back neatly, her eyes clear and assessing. This was Commander Rena Voss, Rowan Hale, she said, her gaze sweeping over the scorched burns on the ship's hull. "You look like a man who just wrestled a storm." Rowan managed a small, tired grin. "We took a few steps with it." Rena's gaze then moved to the small figure standing beside him. Lyra's small hands clutched Rowan's sleeve, but she didn't hide. Rena didn't reach out or stare. She simply lowered her voice, softening its edges. "And this?" Rowan's answer was simple, direct. "Lyra, she's a passenger, crew, a child." Rena held his eyes for a long moment, an entire conversation passing between them without a word. Then, she nodded once. "Come inside." They walked through a clear, pressurized tunnel into the heart of Helios. It opened into a breathtaking garden dome. Real soil, low, leafy trees, and a narrow stream that gurgled peacefully. People moved with quiet purpose. Some wore tool belts, others carried data tablets. An old man sat by the water, tuning a stringed instrument, and he looked up at them with a gentle smile. Lyra slowed, her eyes wide with wonder. She had never seen a real tree before. The leaves were small and bright green. She stood on her toes and reached out a tentative finger to touch one. It was soft, like a whisper against her skin. "It remembers the sun," Rowan said quietly beside her. She looked up at him, her expression one of awe, as if he had just given her a profound secret of the universe. In a bright, functional office, Rena listened as Rowan recounted the short, hard version of their story. The market, the cruel collar, the Dominion patrols, the massive carrier, the desperate escape through the ore field. He spoke plainly, without embellishment or a plea for pity. He simply stated the facts. When he finished, Rena folded her hands on the desk in front of her. "The Dominion will come to our border," she said, her tone serious. "They will use words like ownership and law." Rowan's reply was quiet, but it was forged from iron. "They chained a child." Rena met his unwavering gaze, then tapped her tablet. "Eve, send my terminal the ship logs of the attack. Also, prepare a manifest update." "Manifest ready." Eve's voice came over the room's speaker, and there was a distinct note of pride in her synthesized tone. "Engineer Lyra, status active." Rena looked at Lyra, a new softness in her eyes. "We have forms for guardianship. Human law likes its paperwork, but our law, here on Helios, also begins with a simple question." She turned her full attention to the child. "Do you want to stay with this man?" Lyra did not look at the floor. She did not shy away. She looked directly at Rowan. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes were steady. He waited for her answer. He did not push. "I do," she said, her voice small but clear. "Why?" Rena asked softly. "Because he listens," Lyra said, her words simple but powerful. "He does not call me thing. He calls me child. When I am afraid, he makes the world slow down so I can breathe. When the ship is afraid, he lets me help. He does not break what he means to protect." A genuine smile softened Commander Rena's features. "Then we will simply write down what is already true." She signed the screen with a flourish, then slid a stylus across the desk to Rowan. "Sign, Captain." Rowan picked it up. His hand shook once, a single tremor, and then it stilled. He signed his name. They had barely a moment to breathe, to let the reality of it settle, before a harsh electronic tone cut through the room. "Incoming widecast," a tech shouted from the hall outside. "Dominion relay on the public channel." A cold, imperious voice filled the dome, echoing off the glass and steel, a chilling intrusion into their sanctuary. The voice of the Dominion had found them. "Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. It helps us bring more tales from the Wayfarer to you. We'll see you next time.